Kelly Jenkins had learned to become invisible on United Airlines Flight 342 from San Diego to Washington, D.C. at 36. She possessed the rare gift of being completely forgettable in a place where everyone fought to be noticed. Her nondescript business attire, navy blazer over a white blouse and simple black slacks, hung on her athletic frame, and her brown hair stayed pulled back in the same practical ponytail she'd worn for years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The flight attendants called her 15B in their private conversations, though never to her face. It was partly for her quiet demeanor, partly for how she seemed to shrink into her economy seat whenever the crew walked through the cabin. Every flight, Kelly boarded with military precision. Zone 3, neither too early nor too late. She stowed her single carry-on, accepted water when offered, and spent the flight reviewing documents on her tablet with mechanical focus. For hundreds of thousands of miles, this had been her existence. 5 hours of reviewing reports and technical manuals while the real players in first class networked and made deals. The Boeing 777 hummed with the controlled energy of a long-haul flight. 6 flight attendants moved efficiently through the cabin, each monitoring different aspects of passenger comfort and safety. The cockpit door remained closed, the mysterious realm where the real professionals worked. Kelly's seat was in the middle of the aircraft, deliberately chosen where she wouldn't interfere with crew operations or draw attention. Captain James Harrington commanded Flight 342 with the confidence of someone who had spent 22,000 hours in the air. He was everything Kelly wasn't in the eyes of casual observers: tall, confident, decorated with patches and stripes that told stories of technical mastery and command. His voice carried the authority of someone who had earned respect through years of professional excellence. When he spoke over the intercom, passengers listened. When Kelly spoke, flight attendants often forgot she had said anything at all. Coffee. Refill in 15B. Senior flight attendant Patricia Morgan called out during the mid-flight service, not bothering to look in Kelly's direction. And make sure we have extra snacks for the cockpit today. We've got that weather system to navigate around. Kelly nodded silently, accepting the coffee without complaint. The storm system developing over the Midwest had been bothering her since she'd reviewed the weather briefing before boarding. Certain patterns of atmospheric disturbance concerned her, but every time she'd considered mentioning it to the cabin crew, they dismissed her with professional courtesy that barely concealed their disinterest. First Officer William Chun handled navigation and communications with air traffic control. He had a habit of treating economy passengers like human cargo, safely delivered when needed, otherwise invisible. When Kelly had once politely suggested a more southern routing might provide a smoother ride based on the weather pattern she'd observed, he had nodded absently while checking his flight plan. Economy is worried about the weather again, Chen would tell the other pilots during crew meals. Thinks her weather app is more accurate than our professional forecasts and million-dollar equipment. The other pilots followed Chun's lead. They were good aviators, dedicated professionals, but they had learned that passenger input ranked somewhere below the in-flight magazine's crossword puzzle in the unofficial hierarchy of useful information. Kelly understood their perspective. In commercial aviation, certified pilots mattered more than passengers. But understanding didn't make the dismissal any easier to accept. During her third flight on this route, Kelly had noticed irregularities in the engine sound that concerned her trained ear. Not the basic vibrations that nervous flyers might fixate on, but specific harmonic changes that indicated potential compressor issues in the port-side engine. She had prepared a detailed note for the purser, complete with timestamps and specific observations. The senior flight attendant had taken one look at the note and set it aside without reading. "I appreciate your concern for safety, ma'am, but I can assure you our aircraft undergoes rigorous inspections. Our pilots have everything under control. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe. To our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But these aren't normal sounds. The left engine is producing a specific harmonic that suggests, "Are you questioning our maintenance procedures, ma'am?" The tone in the flight attendant's voice carried a warning that Kelly recognized immediately. She was treading into dangerous territory, questioning the competence of professionals in their domain. "No, not at all. I'll trust your team's expertise." The note had disappeared into the flight attendant's pocket, never to be mentioned again. Kelly learned to keep her observations to herself after that incident. When she noticed potential weather issues that might affect routing, she made mental notes but said nothing. When the pilots announced flight plans that didn't match optimal fuel efficiency or passenger comfort profiles, she remained silent. At night, alone in hotel rooms between flights, Kelly would sometimes study aviation charts and weather systems with professional interest. She understood aerodynamics, knew how to read meteorological data and flight performance tables. But during flights, surrounded by the aviation professionals who actually flew and managed the aircraft, she kept that knowledge carefully hidden. The locked compartment in her carry-on contained more than business documents. Kelly had installed it herself before her first commercial flight, claiming she needed secure storage for classified materials. The lock was military-grade biometric, requiring her thumbprint to open. None of her fellow passengers had ever asked what she kept inside. Sometimes, during turbulent flights when passengers grew nervous, Kelly's hand would drift to that carry-on beneath the seat in front of her. Her fingers would trace the outline of the lock while she monitored the aircraft's movement, feeling every subtle change in attitude and power setting. But she never opened it. Not yet. The compartment represented a life she had carefully buried. A person she had agreed to stop being. 5 years of playing civilian. 5 years of accepting invisibility as the price of normalcy. The contents of that compartment were proof that Kelly Jenkins, corporate consultant and forgotten passenger, was not the whole truth. But maintaining that fiction required constant vigilance. Every flight she put on the uniform of mediocrity, adopted the posture of someone who had never held real responsibility or made life or death decisions. She spoke when spoken to, stayed in her lane, and let the flight crew believe they were the only ones in the aircraft who understood aviation. But General Robert Westfield knew better. He was the Air Force Chief of Staff, a career officer who had spent 35 years learning to read people and situations. Sometimes Kelly would catch him watching her on the rare occasions when their travel coincided, his expression thoughtful but unreadable. Their eyes would meet for a moment across the first-class cabin when she boarded, and Kelly would see recognition there, the kind that came from shared secrets and careful misdirection. Westfield had been present during her transition to civilian life 5 years earlier. He had signed the paperwork that created Kelly Jenkins, corporate consultant, without comment or question, but his signature had been accompanied by a slight nod. The kind of acknowledgement that suggested he understood the necessity of maintaining certain fictions. One evening, as Kelly prepared to deplane after another cross-country flight, Westfield had approached her seat. The cabin was nearly empty, just the cleaning crew preparing for the next service. "Everything running smoothly, Jenkins?" he had asked, his voice casual, but his eyes alert. "Yes, sir. All systems normal." "Good, good." Westfield had paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "You know, this aircraft has an interesting history, built on the frame of military transports that were retired years ago. Sometimes the old frameworks prove stronger than anyone expected." Kelly had understood the metaphor. Old frameworks carefully preserved, waiting to support whatever structure might be needed in the future. "I imagine those frameworks serve their purpose when called upon, sir." "Indeed they do, Jenkins." "Indeed they do. That conversation had taken place 2 months ago. Since then, Westfield had maintained professional distance while ensuring Kelly had access to resources and information that technically exceeded her clearance level. Nothing obvious, nothing that would raise questions, but enough to ensure she remained prepared for possibilities that officially didn't exist. The routine continued unchanged for months. Kelly processed reports, studied industry publications, and endured the casual dismissal of flight crews who saw her as little more than another passenger. She accepted coffee, filed away observations, and monitored flight operations with the practiced eye of someone who understood far more than she revealed. But beneath the surface, Kelly Jenkins was changing. 5 years of playing the passenger had softened her edges, dulled reflexes that had once been razor sharp. The comfortable routine of civilian invisibility was seductive in its safety. Some nights she wondered if she was losing herself entirely, if the fiction of Kelly Jenkins was becoming more real than the person she used to be. The locked compartment reminded her otherwise. Inside, wrapped in protective foam, lay artifacts of a life that officially never existed, credentials that bore no agency markings, photographs of 7 officers who had died in a place that wasn't supposed to exist, and a single challenge coin worn smooth from handling. On one side of the coin, an eagle. On the other, lightning bolts striking through clouds. Kelly would hold that coin during quiet moments in hotel rooms, feeling its familiar weight in her palm. It was a reminder of promises made and broken, of colleagues lost and debts unpaid. But mostly, it was a reminder that some things were worth more than safety, more than the comfortable anonymity of being nobody special. That reminder would prove important sooner than anyone expected. Because at 37,000 feet, emergencies didn't follow schedules or respect the comfortable routines that made air travel predictable. And when professional aviators found themselves in impossible situations, someone had to answer the call. Even if that someone was supposed to be a forgotten passenger in 15B, the storm was building on the horizon. Dark clouds promising the kind of weather that disrupted flight paths and made radio communication unreliable. Kelly watched the developing system through her window with professional interest, noting the implications. Bad weather meant potential turbulence, reduced visibility, increased risk for any aircraft operating in the area. She updated her mental flight status board and prepared for the possibility of diversion as the aircraft continued eastward. Standard procedure, routine assessments that kept her mind engaged, while her body remained comfortably seated in economy class. Flight 342 had been in the air for 3 hours. Their estimated arrival in Washington was due in another 2 hours. Kelly had processed their flight path and knew their emergency diversion options by heart. She found herself hoping they would complete their journey without complications. The flight crew consisted of 4 good professionals who deserved to complete their duty day without incident. Captain Harrington led the team with the kind of competence that came from experience and training. His crew trusted him, and Kelly respected that trust. But the storm system was dangerous, full of unpredictable wind shear and microbursts that could challenge even the most experienced pilots. Weather could turn hostile in minutes, and communication with air traffic control became difficult when the systems rolled in from the Midwest. Kelly checked her watch and returned to her documents. 2 more hours until scheduled arrival time. In her experience, the quiet periods between routine operations were when things usually went wrong. The locked compartment seemed to hum with potential energy, waiting for the moment when Kelly Jenkins would have to stop being invisible and start being something else entirely. That moment was approaching faster than anyone realized. The in-flight service had concluded, cabin crew had collected trash, and passengers had settled into the comfortable lull of cruise flight. Captain Harrington's voice came over the intercom, professional but with an undercurrent of tension that Kelly immediately recognized. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're monitoring a weather system ahead that appears to be intensifying. We're working with air traffic control to find a smooth route around it, but we may experience some turbulence in the next 15 minutes. Please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, please secure the cabin. Kelly stowed her tablet and gazed out the window at the building clouds. The storm was worse than the briefing had predicted, a rapidly intensifying system with vertical development that suggested severe turbulence and potential hail. Through the cabin window, she could see the anvil-shaped tops of cumulonimbus clouds reaching heights that would force significant deviation from their planned route. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft chime, and the cabin crew moved efficiently through the aircraft, checking that passengers were secured. Kelly felt the subtle change in engine power as Captain Harrington began turning to avoid the worst of the weather. The aircraft banked gently left, beginning what Kelly recognized as a standard deviation around a storm cell. What happened next occurred with the sudden violence that made aviation emergencies so dangerous. A massive downdraft caught the aircraft, dropping it several hundred feet in seconds. Oxygen masks deployed as cabin pressure fluctuated. The right wing dipped sharply as the aircraft encountered severe wind shear. Through her window, Kelly saw what no passenger ever wanted to see: the right engine erupting in a shower of sparks as it ingested hail and debris. Captain Harrington's voice remained controlled over the intercom, but Kelly could hear the strain beneath his professional demeanor. "This is your captain. We've encountered severe weather and have lost power in our right engine. We're diverting to Kansas City International. Please remain calm and follow all crew instructions." Kelly secured her oxygen mask while assessing the situation with clinical precision. The aircraft was maintaining controlled flight despite the engine failure, but the severe turbulence made their situation increasingly precarious. Through the cockpit door, which had momentarily opened as a flight attendant entered with emergency information, she glimpsed the flight deck illuminated by warning lights. First Officer Chun was working furiously at the systems panel, while Captain Harrington fought to maintain stable flight. The radio crackled with static, suggesting communication difficulties with air traffic control. Atmospheric interference from the storm was making coordination difficult, but that wasn't unusual during severe weather. Around her, passengers reacted with the panic typical of civilians in emergency situations, some praying quietly, others holding hands with strangers, a few crying softly into oxygen masks that dangled unnecessarily now that cabin pressure had stabilized. Kelly felt a strange calm descend, the familiar focus that had defined her previous career. The emergency wasn't just the engine failure or the weather. It was the cascade of complications that threatened to overwhelm even experienced professionals. The storm was intensifying, creating conditions that would challenge even a fully functional aircraft. With one engine failed and communications compromised, the flight crew faced a situation that tested the limits of standard emergency procedures. What Kelly Jenkins, forgotten passenger, understood that others didn't was the true nature of their predicament. The commercial procedures that Captain Harrington and his crew were trained to follow wouldn't be sufficient for the rapidly evolving emergency they faced. They needed capabilities and knowledge that existed outside standard commercial aviation training. They needed the person Kelly had spent 5 years pretending not to be. The flight deck became the center of a controlled crisis as Captain Harrington and First Officer Chun worked through their emergency checklists. Warning lights illuminated the cockpit in an eerie red glow as system after system registered abnormalities. Beyond the initial engine failure, through the briefly opened cockpit door, Kelly glimpsed the intensity of their concentration. Professionals facing challenges that pushed beyond routine training. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Kansas City approach, This is United 342 declaring an emergency. Harrington transmitted, his voice steady despite the circumstances. We've lost our starboard engine, experiencing severe turbulence, and requesting immediate vectors for approach. The response from air traffic control came back fragmented, broken by static that suggested the storm was affecting ground communications. As well, United 342, radar contact, proceed. Heading, 270. Kelly listened intently as the incomplete instructions filtered back through the cabin. The fragmented transmission contained insufficient guidance for an aircraft in distress. Without clear approach instructions and reliable communication, the flight crew would face increasing challenges as they attempted to navigate through violent weather toward an unfamiliar airport. The cabin jolted violently as another microburst caught the aircraft, dropping it several hundred feet in seconds. Oxygen masks swung wildly as passengers gasped collectively. A flight attendant lost her footing and fell against a row of seats, grimacing as her wrist twisted unnaturally. Kelly made her decision. The biometric lock on her carry-on recognized her thumbprint with a soft click. Inside the compartment, beneath careful layers of protective foam, lay credentials that it had cost significant political capital to create. A specialized communication device, unmarked except for a small etching that looked like lightning striking through clouds. Next to it, folded with military precision, was an identification card modified in ways that no civilian credential service provided. At the bottom of the compartment, 7 photographs looked up at her. 7 officers who had died in a place that wasn't supposed to exist, killed by equipment failures that had somehow slipped past multiple inspection protocols. 7 colleagues who had trusted Kelly to keep them alive and had paid the ultimate price for that trust. Kelly lifted the photographs, studying faces she saw in her dreams every night. Major David Ramirez, the unit's communications specialist, who had joked about retirement plans right up until the hydraulic system failed. Captain Jennifer Walsh, their systems engineer, who had taught Kelly how to bypass electrical failures using household materials. Colonel Lisa Thompson, their commanding officer, who had died trying to save her subordinates from the cascading system's collapse. Each photograph was a promise unfulfilled, a debt that could never be truly repaid. But today, Kelly had a chance to ensure that 157 more families wouldn't receive solemn notifications and carefully worded explanations. She put the photographs back in the compartment and removed her credentials. The weight was familiar, comforting in the way that reliable tools always were. Beside it, the communication device hummed against her fingers, technology that had been designed to function in environments where conventional systems failed. Kelly Jenkins, the forgotten passenger, began to disappear the moment she touched that equipment. What emerged from the shadows of memory was someone else entirely. Someone who had spent years learning to fly aircraft through conditions that commercial pilots were trained to avoid. The storm was about to discover what happened when legends stopped pretending to be dead. Kelly moved through the cabin with purpose, but carefully controlled purpose that drew minimal attention. At 37,000 feet, the cabin crew was fully focused on securing passengers and preparing for potential emergency landing procedures. She avoided the main aisle, using the moment flight attendants were checking seatbelts to make her way forward. Her approach to the flight deck was timed to coincide with a moment when the senior flight attendant was assisting the injured colleague. The cockpit door remained secured, standard procedure during emergencies, but Kelly's credentials were designed for exactly this scenario. She pressed the call button outside the cockpit door. Through the small window, she could see First Officer Chun glance back with irritation at the interruption. When he saw Kelly's credentials held against the glass, his expression changed from annoyance to confusion. The cockpit door opened. When that happens, you'll lose all navigation capability and flight controls will revert to mechanical backup. I can help you land this aircraft, but we need to act now." In those critical seconds, Harrington made the decision that experienced commanders make when faced with impossible situations. He recognized when specialized expertise outweighed standard procedures. "Get in here. Chun, verify her credentials while I fly." Kelly entered the flight deck, the familiar environment washing over her like returning home. The warning lights, the vibration of a compromised airframe, the smell of electrical systems operating beyond design parameters, all of it triggered muscle memory from training scenarios that had pushed beyond commercial limitations. Chun examined her credentials while Kelly studied the instrument panel, taking in the cascading failures with professional interest. "These are legitimate, Captain." "She's Air Force Special Access. What exactly does that mean, Colonel?" Harrington asked, his hands steady on the controls as the aircraft bucked through another patch of turbulence. "It means I'm rated to fly this aircraft in conditions beyond commercial limitations. It means I understand the system's failure you're experiencing because I was part of the team that investigated the same failure pattern 3 years ago. And it means I can help you get these people safely on the ground if you're willing to try procedures that aren't in your manual." Harrington met her eyes for a moment, the professional assessment of one pilot evaluating another. "You're claiming you can fly this aircraft better than I can?" "No, Captain. I'm claiming I can help you fly this aircraft beyond what your training prepared you for. You're still pilot in command. I'm just bringing additional capabilities to your cockpit." Another warning light illuminated, hydraulic pressure dropping in the primary system. Harrington's jaw tightened as he processed the implications. "What do you suggest, Colonel?" Kelly moved to the systems panel, where Chun had been attempting to isolate the electrical failures. "First, we need to bypass the automated protection systems that are shutting down your components sequentially. The onboard computer thinks it's protecting critical systems, but it's actually creating a cascade that will eventually leave you with nothing." Her fingers moved across the panel with practiced precision, entering command sequences that weren't part of commercial pilot training. "Second, we need to contact air traffic control through alternate frequencies. The standard channels are compromised by the storm, but military bands remain functional." She removed her communication device and interfaced it with the aircraft's radio system. "This will give you direct access to Andrew's approach on secured frequencies. They can provide weather data and approach guidance that Kansas City can't provide right now." The radio crackled to life with crystal clarity that contrasted sharply with the static-filled commercial frequencies. "Unidentified aircraft on military frequency. Identify yourself." Kelly keyed the microphone. "Andrew's approach. This is Colonel Kelly Jenkins. Authentication code Sierra Tango 7903. Operating from United Airlines Flight 342. We have an emergency situation requiring immediate support." The response was immediate and professional. "Authentication confirmed, Colonel. How can we assist?" "We need current weather data for Kansas City approach and alternate emergency diversion options. Aircraft is experiencing progressive systems failure following engine loss and severe weather." While Andrews processed her request, Kelly continued, "Working on the electrical systems. Captain, we need to isolate the automated bus and switch to manual distribution. When I give the word, throw switches 7 through 12 while I reroute power from the APU." Harrington hesitated for only a moment before complying. His years of experience told him that this woman knew exactly what she was doing. Her familiarity with aircraft systems exceeded what even senior commercial pilots typically possessed. "Now," Kelly directed, and together they executed a power reconfiguration that wasn't taught in commercial training. The warning lights on the electrical panel dimmed as systems stabilized. Not fixed, but temporarily halted from further degradation. "How did you learn to do that?" Chun asked, his voice mixing professional curiosity with lingering suspicion. "The hard way," Kelly replied, her focus remaining on the systems panel. 3 years ago, 7 good officers died when this same failure sequence occurred in aircraft that shouldn't have experienced these problems. I was the only survivor, and I spent the next year understanding exactly how the systems failed, so it would never happen again. Andrew's approach returned with detailed information. Colonel, weather at Kansas City is deteriorating rapidly. Ceiling now at 200 feet, visibility less than a quarter mile. Wind shear reported on all approaches. We're uploading alternative diversion options to your device now. Kelly studied the data with practiced efficiency. Captain, Kansas City is below minimums even for emergency approaches. Whiteman Air Force Base is reporting better conditions and has emergency recovery capabilities for civilian aircraft. I recommend immediate diversion. Harrington processed the recommendation while fighting to maintain stable flight through intensifying turbulence. Whiteman is a military installation. They're not equipped for civilian passenger operations. They have a 12,000-foot runway. Crash response teams train for larger aircraft than this, and weather conditions that will allow a successful approach. More importantly, they have an instrument landing system that can guide us in when your navigation fails completely. As if emphasizing her point, another warning light illuminated, the secondary navigation system beginning to show instability. Harrington made his decision with the clarity that came from years of command experience. Andrew's approach united. 342 requests, emergency diversion to Whiteman Air Force Base. Request approach and landing clearance. United 342, cleared to Whiteman. Turn right heading 240. Descend and maintain flight level 240. Whiteman approach has been notified and will take handoff in approximately 12 minutes. Kelly interfaced her device with the aircraft's navigation system, uploading approach procedures that weren't available in commercial databases. Captain, when we establish contact with Whiteman, request a Spock approach to runway 01. Spock approach? I'm not familiar with that procedure. Special Operations Classified Kinetics. It's a modified instrument approach designed for aircraft with compromised systems. The procedure isn't in commercial databases because it exceeds normal safety parameters. Chun looked alarmed. Are you suggesting we fly an approach that's considered unsafe by commercial standards? Kelly met his eyes directly. I'm suggesting we fly an approach designed specifically for aircraft in our condition. The commercial standards assume functioning systems that we no longer have. This procedure was developed for worst-case scenarios, exactly like ours. Harrington processed this information while guiding the aircraft through another violent patch of turbulence. The compromised electrical system was stabilized but not repaired, and the single functioning engine labored against the storm's fury. Colonel, I need to know exactly what this approach entails before I commit 157 lives to a procedure I've never flown. Kelly nodded, respecting his command authority while preparing the technical details. It's a continuous descent approach with modified decision heights and specialized callouts. The procedure accommodates single-engine operation, compromised electrical systems, and potential control surface limitations. She displayed the approach plate on her device, highlighting key elements. The critical difference is the descent profile, steeper than commercial standards, but within the structural capabilities of this airframe. It reduces your exposure to the severe weather at lower altitudes and minimizes the time spent in configurations that stress your remaining systems. Harrington studied the procedure with professional interest, his experience allowing him to quickly grasp the modified parameters. This looks like it was designed for military aircraft, not commercial transports. It was adapted for this specific airframe after the incidents 3 years ago. I helped write the procedure based on simulator testing and actual flight data from the accidents. Another warning light, hydraulic pressure continuing to decrease in secondary systems. Harrington's decision was made for him by the deteriorating aircraft systems. We'll fly your approach, Colonel. But I remain pilot in command, and if at any point I determine we're exceeding safety parameters, we'll revert to standard procedures." "Understood, Captain." That's exactly how the command structure should work. Kelly activated her communication device again. Andrews, United 342 requests handoff to Whiteman with notification that we'll be flying a Spock approach. Authentication code remains active. The response came immediately. United 342, Whiteman is notified and prepared for your arrival. Special recovery procedures are being implemented now. Good luck, Colonel. As the aircraft descended through layers of turbulent cloud formations, Kelly worked with Chun to prepare the systems for approach configurations. Her knowledge of the aircraft's emergency procedures extended beyond what was taught in commercial training, incorporating modifications and workarounds developed through classified testing programs. When we configure for landing, you'll experience control sensitivity beyond normal parameters, she explained to Harrington. The modified electrical routing changes the feedback loop in the fly-by-wire system. It will feel like the aircraft is responding too quickly to inputs. Harrington nodded, his hand steady on the controls despite the increasingly violent motion of the aircraft. Similar to when we lose yaw damper functionality. Similar but more pronounced. You'll want to use smaller inputs and anticipate the response delay that follows. Think of it as flying the aircraft mechanically rather than electronically. The storm intensified as they descended, lightning illuminating the cockpit in brief. Stark flashes. Rain hammered against the windscreen with force that challenged the wiper's capacity. Through breaks in the cloud layers, Kelly could see the Missouri landscape below, obscured by sheets of precipitation that reduced visibility to dangerous levels. Whiteman approach, United 342 Heavy, descending through flight level 180 with Spock approach requested. Harrington transmitted as they established contact with the Air Force Base. United 342, Whiteman approach. We have you on radar. You are cleared for Spock approach to runway 01. Special recovery teams are in position. Be advised, weather at field is deteriorating with ceiling now 300 feet, visibility 1/2 mile. Window 3-0 at 28 gusts 40. Kelly activated specialized equipment from her device, establishing a data link with Whiteman's approach control. This will give us precision guidance beyond what commercial systems provide. The military approach radar can track us through the storm and provide course corrections that account for wind shear. As they configured for approach, the aircraft shuddered as another hydraulic system failed completely. Warning lights cascaded across the panel as control surfaces reverted to mechanical backup systems. Loss of hydraulic pressure in System B, Chun reported, his voice tight but professional. Flaps and slats operating on emergency power. Kelly moved immediately to the backup panel. Captain, we need to extend flaps now, before we lose the capability entirely. 10 degrees initially, then hold configuration until we're established on final approach. Harrington complied, feeling the aircraft buck as the flaps extended asymmetrically in the turbulent airflow. The control yoke pulled hard to the right as the aerodynamic configuration changed, requiring significant physical effort to maintain stable flight. This is exactly why the Spock approach is designed with a modified flap schedule, Kelly explained, her voice calm despite the deteriorating situation. We extend configuration changes earlier, allowing time to stabilize before the next critical phase. Through her headset, Kelly could hear the Whiteman approach controller providing continuous guidance, using protocols that commercial controllers weren't trained to deliver. The military precision reflected in every transmission as they guided the damaged aircraft toward safety. United 342, you're drifting right of course line. Suggest 5-degree correction to heading 015 to re-intercept. Kelly monitored the navigation display, noting the specialized symbology that her device had overlaid on the commercial system. Captain, The approach controller is using predictive tracking that accounts for wind shear layers. Their heading suggestions will seem counterintuitive, but trust them. Harrington made the correction, feeling the aircraft fight against controls that required increasingly physical effort to manipulate. How much longer can we maintain controlled flight with these systems degrading? Approximately 12 minutes. At current degradation rates, Kelly answered honestly. The approach is designed to get us on the ground in 9 minutes if we maintain profile. The aircraft broke through a lower cloud layer, revealing the landscape below in greater detail. Through sheets of rain, Kelly could see the approaching airfield, the long concrete runway illuminated with military precision despite the storm's fury. United 342, 5 miles from threshold. You are cleared to land runway 01. Be advised. Emergency vehicles are positioned along the entire runway length. Wind now 040 at 32 gusts 45. Harrington began their final descent, the aircraft buffeting violently as wind shear created unpredictable lift conditions. The control yoke juddered in his hands as mechanical systems strained against forces they weren't designed to counteract. "Colonel, I'm not sure we can maintain this approach profile with the control authority we have remaining," he said, his voice reflecting the physical effort required to fly the aircraft. Kelly moved beside him, placing her hands on the secondary controls. "Permission to assist, Captain. I've flown this approach in worse conditions during testing." Harrington nodded, and together they guided the massive aircraft through the final approach phase. Kelly's inputs were subtle but precise, anticipating control surface responses before they manifested and counteracting them with practiced efficiency. 2,000 feet, gear down, Chun called, extending the landing gear using the emergency system as the normal hydraulics had failed completely. The aircraft shuddered as the gear extended into the airstream, creating additional drag that further complicated their already challenging flight profile. Warning horns sounded as multiple systems reported abnormal configurations, creating a cacophony of alerts that Chun systematically acknowledged and overrode. 1,000 feet, stable approach, Kelly reported, using the military terminology. That differed slightly from commercial procedures. Decision height adjusted for Spock parameters. Through the rain-streaked windscreen, the runway approach lights appeared intermittently, providing momentary visual guidance before being obscured by sheets of precipitation. The aircraft continued its descent, now just 500 feet above the Missouri landscape, guided by precision approach equipment that existed outside commercial aviation systems. United 342, you are precisely on course and glide path. Continue approach, winds holding steady. You are cleared to land. At 300 feet, another system failed, the last remnants of the primary electrical bus succumbing to damage that had begun with the engine failure. The cockpit darkened momentarily before emergency lighting activated, casting an eerie glow across instruments that now operated solely on backup power. "Captain, we've lost primary electrical completely," Chun reported. "Operating on emergency power only." Kelly's device maintained its connection to Whiteman's approach control, providing guidance that the aircraft systems could no longer deliver. 100 feet, runway in sight, continuing approach. The wheels touched down with more force than standard procedures recommended, but well within the structural limitations of the aircraft. Harrington and Kelly worked in synchronized precision, managing the rollout of an aircraft that no longer responded to normal control inputs. "Reverse thrust on operating engine only," Harrington commanded, applying asymmetric braking to compensate for the uneven deceleration. The aircraft slowed progressively, the efforts of pilots combining with physics to bring 175 tons of metal, fuel, and humanity to a controlled stop on a runway designed for military operations. As they reached taxi speed, emergency vehicles surrounded them, lights flashing through the continuing downpour. United 342, welcome to Whiteman, the tower controller transmitted. Professional composure momentarily giving way to genuine relief. Taxi via emergency guidance to your right. Fire services will escort you to hardened shelter. In the sudden quiet that followed shutdown procedures, Harrington turned to Kelly, his expression mixing professional respect with lingering questions about her true identity. Colonel Jenkins, I don't know exactly who you are or what program you represent, but I know 157 people are alive right now because you were on my aircraft. Kelly secured her specialized equipment, already preparing for the explanations and debriefings that would follow. Captain Harrington, sometimes the right person is in the right place at exactly the moment they're needed most. Today was one of those times. First Officer Chun studied her with new understanding. You're not just Air Force Special Access, are you? You're part of something else entirely. Kelly smiled slightly. Let's just say there are programs designed to ensure that certain types of accidents don't happen again. Sometimes that means putting specialized personnel in places where they might be needed. Through the cockpit window, Kelly could see Air Force personnel approaching the aircraft, including officers whose insignia identified them as part of programs that operated outside normal military structures. General Westfield would be notified. Within minutes, and the carefully maintained fiction of Kelly Jenkins, corporate consultant, would require significant adjustment. But 157 people would be calling their families tonight instead of having notifications delivered to their next of kin. 7 photographs in a locked compartment had silently witnessed another debt partially repaid. The legend had returned from carefully constructed obscurity, and the aviation community was about to be reminded why some skills were too valuable to disappear completely. The debriefing room at Whiteman Air Force Base hummed with controlled activity as senior officers gathered to understand exactly what had happened aboard United 342. Kelly sat at the center of the conference table, her specialized equipment secured in containers that bore no identifying markings beyond classification levels that most military personnel would never encounter. Around her, the atmosphere carried the particular tension that emerged when compartmentalized programs unexpectedly intersected in public view. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Colonel Marcus Davidson, the base commander, studied Kelly with professional curiosity. At 52, Davidson had spent enough time in classified operations to recognize when someone operated beyond normal chains of command. Colonel Jenkins, I've received preliminary notification from General Westfield's office. They're sending a specialized team to manage the civilian aspects of this incident. Until then, we're operating under special access protocols. Kelly nodded, understanding the implications. The civilian aspects referred to the 154 passengers and 3 flight attendants who had witnessed a routine commercial flight transform into something that defied explanation. Managing that narrative would require expertise in areas that extended beyond military authority. Thank you, Colonel. I'll need secure communication with Program Director Callahan as soon as possible. The system's failures we experienced weren't random or weather-related. The pattern matches previous incidents that were supposed to have been addressed through manufacturing recalls. Davidson's eyes narrowed slightly. You're suggesting sabotage? I'm suggesting a failure of oversight that allowed compromised components to remain in service, despite documented vulnerabilities. Whether that failure was deliberate or negligent remains to be determined. Captain Harrington and First Officer Chun sat across from Kelly, their professional composure maintained despite the extraordinary circumstances they had just experienced. Both men had been separated from their passengers upon landing, whisked immediately to the secure facility while Air Force personnel managed the deplaning process with efficiency that commercial aviation rarely achieved. What happens to our Passengers? Harrington asked, his concern for those under his care evident despite his exhaustion. They've been through a traumatic experience and deserve explanations. Colonel Davidson responded with the careful precision of someone navigating classified boundaries. They're being processed through our visitor center. Transportation to Kansas City International is being arranged. The official explanation is that you experienced a mechanical emergency requiring diversion to the nearest suitable airfield. And when they ask why a commercial airliner landed at a military base with the assistance of someone who appeared from nowhere, Chun's question carried the edge of someone whose professional reality had been fundamentally challenged. Kelly met his gaze directly. They'll receive explanations consistent with FAA procedures for emergency diversions. The details regarding my involvement will be managed through channels designed for exactly this type of situation. You mean they'll be lied to? Chun said flatly. They'll be provided information appropriate to their security clearance and need to know, Kelly corrected gently, just as you're receiving information appropriate to yours. Before Chun could respond, the conference room door opened to admit General Robert Westfield, the Air Force Chief of Staff's presence at a remote base for what officially qualified as a routine emergency diversion demonstrated exactly how routine this situation wasn't. Everyone stood as Westfield entered, military courtesy automatically engaging despite the unusual circumstances. The general moved directly to Kelly, his handshake conveying both professional respect and personal concern. Colonel Jenkins, it seems your position on that flight wasn't coincidental after all. No, sir. The flight manifest algorithms identified Captain Harrington's crew as flying an aircraft with potentially compromised components. My presence was precautionary, but proved necessary. Westfield turned to Harrington and Chun, offering his hand. Gentlemen, exceptional flying under the most challenging conditions possible. Your professionalism saved lives today. Harrington accepted the handshake, his exhaustion momentarily eclipsed by the recognition of his service from such a senior officer. Thank you, sir. But without Colonel Jenkins's intervention, I'm not certain we would have reached safe landing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's precisely why certain programs exist, Captain. To ensure that specialized capabilities are available when conventional resources reach their limits. Westfield gestured everyone back to their seats. Now, I need to understand exactly what happened today, starting with the initial systems failures and progressing through the emergency procedures you implemented. For the next hour, Harrington and Kelly provided a detailed technical briefing on the cascading failures that had threatened United 342. Their descriptions revealed the extraordinary coordination that had developed between commercial pilot and military specialists during those critical minutes. Professionals from different worlds finding common language in their shared commitment to saving lives. Shun contributed precise observations about systems behaviors that contradicted manufacturer specifications, his initial skepticism gradually transforming into technical curiosity about the specialized knowledge Kelly possessed. The electrical bus failure sequence violated redundancy protocols that should have prevented cascading effects, Chun explained, using the debriefing room's display system to illustrate his observations. It's as if the protection systems were being systematically bypassed by the onboard computer. Kelly nodded, her expression thoughtful. That's consistent with what we observed in previous incidents. The aircraft systems are being compromised through what appears to be normal protection responses, but actually creates vulnerability patterns that accumulate until catastrophic failure becomes inevitable. You're describing a design flaw that somehow escaped detection through certification? Harrington asked, professional concern evident in his voice. I'm describing something more deliberate, Kelly replied carefully, looking to General Westfield for permission to continue. At his nod, She activated her secure device, displaying technical schematics that weren't available in commercial documentation. 3 years ago, Air Force Transport 7709 experienced a similar failure sequence during a classified mission. 7 officers died when the aircraft systems failed in patterns that defied standard protection protocols. I was the only survivor, thrown clear during the final moments before impact. The room fell silent as the implications registered. Kelly continued, her voice steady despite the personal connection to the tragedy. The subsequent investigation identified a vulnerability in certain aircraft that could be triggered through specific environmental conditions. Manufacturer recalls were initiated, modifications implemented, and protection protocols enhanced. But the vulnerability persisted, Westfield added, his expression grim. Despite assurances that all affected components had been replaced, Kelly nodded. Today's incident confirms that aircraft remain in service with this same vulnerability. Patterns. The question is whether this represents a failure of quality control or something more deliberate. Davidson leaned forward, the base commander's expression reflecting the seriousness of potential sabotage affecting civilian aircraft. You're suggesting someone is intentionally allowing compromised aircraft to continue flying? I'm suggesting we need to determine how United 342 was cleared for service with components that should have been replaced 3 years ago. Whether that represents institutional failure or deliberate action remains to be established. General Westfield activated his secure tablet, transmitting instructions that would initiate investigative protocols beyond standard military channels. Captain Harrington, Mr. Chun, your aircraft is now under secure containment. Technical teams are en route from Andrews to conduct forensic analysis of all systems. Until those teams complete their work, this incident remains classified at levels beyond commercial aviation authorities. Harrington processed this information with the measured calculation of a professional, suddenly thrust into realms beyond his normal operations. Sir, with respect, I have responsibilities to my company, my passengers, and aviation authorities. I need to understand what I can and cannot disclose about today's events. You'll be fully briefed on disclosure protocols before departing. Whiteman, Westfield assured him. For now, understand that certain aspects of Colonel Jenkins's assistance fall under national security protection. You performed admirably under extraordinary circumstances, and nothing in our response diminishes that fact. As the debriefing continued, Kelly found herself studying the 2 commercial pilots with professional respect that transcended her. Classified knowledge. They had faced conditions beyond their training, adapted to assistance from unexpected sources, and maintained command presence throughout an emergency that would have broken less capable aviators. Most importantly, they had set aside professional ego when lives depended on accepting help from outside their normal operational framework. That quality, the willingness to recognize when specialized expertise offered better solutions than standard procedures, distinguished truly exceptional professionals from merely competent ones. 3 hours into the debriefing, a senior, non-commissioned officer entered with information that shifted the discussion's direction. General preliminary analysis of the aircraft's black box confirms Colonel Jenkins's assessment. The failure sequence matches the pattern identified in the 7709 incident, including the timing intervals between system degradations. Westfield absorbed this confirmation with the grim satisfaction of someone whose suspicions had been validated. Expand the investigation to include all aircraft from the same manufacturing batch. Priority on any currently in service or scheduled for imminent departure. Already initiated, sir. Andrews reports that specialized teams are deploying to major airports where similar aircraft are operating. FAA has been notified through secure channels that a precautionary inspection is underway. Kelly recognized the careful wording that would allow critical safety measures without creating public panic. The precautionary inspection would appear routine to airline operations while actually representing an urgent security intervention. What happens now? Chun asked, his professional demeanor maintaining composure despite the extraordinary revelations. You'll be transported to Kansas City to rejoin your crew, Westfield explained. Specialized teams will manage communication with your airline and aviation authorities. As far as the public and media are concerned, United 342 experienced a mechanical emergency requiring diversion. The aircraft is undergoing routine inspection before returning to service. And Colonel Jenkins? Harrington asked, looking toward the woman who had appeared from economy class to save his aircraft. Colonel Jenkins will be returning to her regular duties, Westfield replied with careful precision. Her presence on today's flight has been officially recorded as a routine military passenger traveling on personal leave. The subtle communication between General and Colonel did not go unnoticed by the commercial pilots. Whatever regular duties meant in this context clearly extended beyond conventional military assignments. As the debriefing concluded, Kelly gathered her specialized equipment while Harrington and Chun prepared for transport to Kansas City. The temporary alliance formed during crisis was dissolving as each professional returned to their respective domains. Colonel, Harrington said quietly as they prepared to depart the conference room, I've been flying commercial aircraft for 22 years. I've never experienced anything like what happened today, both the emergency and the response. Whatever program you're part of, I'm grateful it exists. Kelly met his eyes with the professional respect one pilot offers another. Captain, professionals like you make my job possible. You maintained command authority under impossible conditions, adapted to assistance that appeared from unexpected sources. That combination of leadership and flexibility saved lives today. Chun approached, his initial skepticism now transformed into something approaching professional curiosity. The approach procedure you implemented, Spock, it's not in any commercial database or training program. Are there others? There are specialized procedures developed for multiple emergency scenarios, Kelly acknowledged carefully. They exist outside commercial aviation frameworks because they exceed normal operational parameters, meaning they push aircraft beyond certified limitations, Chun translated, his technical mind grasping the implications. They push aircraft to their actual structural and performance capabilities rather than their certified limitations, Kelly corrected gently. Those aren't always the same thing. The distinction registered with both pilots, the gap between what aviation authorities certified as safe and what aircraft could actually accomplish when circumstances demanded. That gap represented the domain where Kelly and her colleagues operated, pushing beyond documented limitations when lives depended on capabilities that existed beyond certification. As they prepared to separate, the commercial pilots returning to their world of scheduled operations and published procedures, Kelly to domains that existed beyond public awareness, Harrington offered a final observation that demonstrated his understanding of what had truly happened. You know, for years I've heard stories among senior captains. Incidents where aircraft in extremis somehow made it to safety through procedures that didn't exist in any manual. Approaches that shouldn't have been possible, systems recovery that defied technical explanation. Most of us dismissed those as professional legend building. Kelly smiled slightly. Professional communities often develop legends to explain experiences that fall outside normal frameworks. But some legends have foundations in reality, Harrington concluded. Some stories persist because they represent truth that can't be officially acknowledged. The best legends often do, Captain. Their conversation was interrupted as military personnel arrived to escort the commercial pilots to their transportation. The formal separation of classified and unclassified worlds reasserting itself as the emergency that had temporarily bridged those domains concluded. General Westfield remained with Kelly as the others departed, waiting until the room was secure. Before addressing the implications of the day's events, The vulnerability pattern matching 7709 confirms what we've suspected. The manufacturing recall was compromised. Kelly nodded, her mind already processing the broader implications. The question is whether today's aircraft represents an isolated quality control failure or evidence of systematic subversion. That's what your next assignment will determine, Westfield replied, activating his secure tablet to transfer mission. Parameters that existed outside normal military channels. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to program oversight, with authorization to access all manufacturing and maintenance records for the affected aircraft series. Someone deliberately left vulnerable aircraft in service, Kelly said quietly. The personal impact of this reality momentarily breaking through her professional composure. After 7 officers died demonstrating the vulnerability existed. And they're still in positions that allow them to continue doing so, Westfield confirmed grimly. Your job is to find them before more aircraft experience what United 342 faced today. Kelly accessed the mission parameters, reviewing technical details with the focused precision that had defined her career. Behind the professional analysis, however, lay the personal motivation that drove her beyond normal operational boundaries. 7 faces that appeared in her dreams. Colleagues who had trusted systems that failed them through deliberate action, rather than random mechanical failure. The passenger manifest algorithms identified this flight as high risk, based on maintenance records that suggested compromised components, Kelly noted, studying data that had led to her presence on United 342. That system is working as designed, but it's reactive rather than preventive. We're identifying vulnerable aircraft after they're already in service with passengers aboard. Which is why your new assignment focuses on the manufacturing and certification process, Westfield explained. We need to identify how compromised components are entering the system and who's ensuring they remain in service despite safety directives. Kelly considered the implications with the strategic assessment that came from years operating in domains where threats emerged from unexpected directions. The technical sophistication required to implement this vulnerability suggests state-level actors rather than individual sabotage. That's the working theory. The question is which state and what their ultimate objective might be. The conversation paused as Kelly's secure device activated with an incoming priority message. The identification code registered from program Director Callahan, indicating information too sensitive for even this secure facility's communication systems. I need to take this in a SCIF, Kelly said, referring to the sensitive compartmented information facility that provided the highest level of communication security. Westfield nodded. Use the facility adjacent to my temporary office. I'll ensure you're not disturbed. Inside the SCIF, surrounded by technology designed to prevent any electronic or acoustic surveillance, Kelly activated her secure device and accepted the incoming communication. Director Callahan's image appeared on the display, her expression conveying the urgency behind this contact. Colonel, preliminary analysis confirms your assessment. The component failure sequence in United 342 matches not only the 7709 incident, but 5 other commercial aircraft emergencies, previously attributed to maintenance issues or pilot error. We're dealing with a deliberate pattern that has already claimed civilian lives. The implication registered immediately. What Kelly had experienced aboard United 342 wasn't an isolated incident or the first time compromised aircraft had created emergency situations. It was simply the first time someone with her specialized knowledge had been present to identify the true nature of the failure. How many aircraft remain in service with the vulnerable components? Kelly asked, her mind already calculating the scale of the potential threat. Current estimates suggest between 15 and 20 aircraft operating with major carriers, primarily on international routes. We're implementing screening protocols through maintenance records, but we need more direct intervention. The mission, was taking shape with clarity that came from years of operational experience. Kelly would need to trace the vulnerable components from manufacturing through certification and into service, identifying both the technical vulnerability and the human systems that allowed it to persist despite known fatal consequences. "I'll need a new operational cover," Kelly noted, thinking through the practical requirements. "The United incident has compromised my current identity with airline personnel." "Already in development," Callahan confirmed. "New credentials will be waiting at Andrews when you arrive. Priority air transport is being arranged from Whiteman now." As the communication concluded, Kelly found herself reflecting on the extraordinary convergence of factors that had placed her aboard United 342 at the precise moment when her specialized capabilities were needed. The passenger manifest algorithms had identified potential risk, but the actual emergency had required human intervention that existed beyond automated systems. The passengers would never know how close they had come to becoming statistics in an accident investigation that would have attributed their loss to weather, mechanical failure, or some combination of factors that obscured the underlying truth. They would return to their lives with stories about an emergency landing and perhaps fleeting memories of a quiet woman from economy class who had somehow appeared in the cockpit during the crisis, but the aviation community would remember. Pilots like Harrington and Chun would carry the experience forward, perhaps sharing carefully edited versions with colleagues during quiet conversations after flight duties concluded. The legend would grow, joining other stories that circulated among aviation professionals about moments when the normal boundaries between military and civilian operations temporarily dissolved in service to a higher purpose. As Kelly prepared to depart Whiteman for her next assignment, she paused to check the secure compartment in her carry-on. The 7 photographs remained precisely as she had left them, silent witnesses to her continuing mission. Today she had helped prevent another aircraft from joining the tragic statistics that claimed their lives. Tomorrow would begin the process of ensuring no more aircraft carried the vulnerability that threatened passengers without their knowledge. The quiet passenger in 15B was disappearing, her temporary identity already being replaced by credentials that would grant access to manufacturing facilities, maintenance operations, and certification processes where the next phase of her mission would unfold. The legend that had momentarily emerged during crisis was returning to the shadows where specialized capabilities operated beyond public awareness. But somewhere in the skies above America, commercial aircraft continued flying with passengers who would never know that their safety depended on capabilities that existed beyond the comfortable certainties of published procedures and certified limitations. The gap between what official systems acknowledged and what reality sometimes demanded remained the domain where Colonel Kelly Jenkins and her colleagues operated, the space where legends were born and lives were saved through capabilities that officially didn't exist. 3 weeks after United 342's emergency landing at Whiteman Air Force Base, Amanda Parker walked confidently through the main entrance of Precision Aeronautics Manufacturing. Her credentials identified her as a quality control specialist from the Federal Aviation Administration, her dark business suit and authoritative demeanor completing the image of a government inspector on routine business. The security guard barely glanced at her identification before waving her through. Federal inspectors were common at facilities that produced critical aircraft components. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Kelly Jenkins had disappeared entirely, replaced by an identity so thoroughly constructed that it would withstand even the most rigorous background verification. Amanda Parker had 15 years of documented experience in aviation certification, complete with performance reviews, residential history, and professional references that would confirm her existence if anyone checked. The manufacturing facility hummed with precision activity as technicians assembled components that would eventually control critical functions in commercial and military aircraft. Overhead signs reminded workers that quality equals safety and precision saves lives, corporate motivational messaging that carried more truth than most realized. Chief Engineer Marcus Wilson met Amanda in the facility's main conference room, his expression conveying the particular wariness that industry professionals reserve for government inspectors. At 58, Wilson had spent 3 decades designing aircraft systems that balanced performance, reliability, and cost, the eternal triangle that defined aviation manufacturing. Miss Parker, welcome to Precision Aeronautics. We weren't expecting an FAA inspection this month. Our next scheduled review is in October. Amanda smiled professionally while activating specialized equipment, disguised as standard tablets and inspection tools. This isn't a scheduled inspection. Mr. Wilson, we're conducting a focused review of electrical bus components across multiple manufacturers following an incident last month. Wilson's expression shifted subtly, concern mixing with professional curiosity. United 342? We've heard rumors about systems failures beyond what's been publicly reported. I'm not at liberty to discuss specific incidents, Amanda replied with practiced bureaucratic deflection. My authorization covers manufacturing processes, quality control protocols, and component traceability for electrical distribution systems. In the 800 series, what Amanda didn't reveal was that her inspection equipment was scanning for electromagnetic signatures that would identify components modified with the specific vulnerability pattern identified in United 342 and the earlier Air Force incident. While appearing to conduct routine documentation review, she was actually building a comprehensive map of compromised manufacturing processes. Wilson provided access to production records and quality control documentation while a facility tour was arranged. You'll find our processes exceed FSE requirements in most areas. We've implemented enhanced testing protocols specifically for electrical components following previous service bulletins. Amanda nodded professionally while reviewing documents that revealed exactly what she had suspected. On paper, everything appeared perfect. The quality control system showed rigorous testing. The documentation demonstrated meticulous compliance with safety directives, and the certification records confirmed that vulnerable components have been identified and replaced. Yet United 342 had nearly crashed with those same replaced components still installed in critical systems. I'd like to observe your testing procedures for the electrical bus protection systems, Amanda requested, her tablet discreetly scanning for signals that would indicate tampering beyond what documentation could reveal. For the next 4 hours, Amanda moved through the facility with professional efficiency, asking detailed technical questions while her specialized equipment gathered evidence invisible to conventional inspection. The manufacturing technicians demonstrated processes that appeared to meet or exceed safety standards, yet her scans detected subtle anomalies in specific component batches, variations that wouldn't affect normal operation but would create catastrophic vulnerabilities under certain conditions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In the quality control laboratory, Amanda's attention focused on a senior technician named Robert Mercer. Unlike his colleagues who demonstrated professional pride in showing their work to an inspector, Mercer seemed uncomfortable with detailed examination of his testing procedures. His eyes tracked Amanda's equipment with particular wariness, suggesting someone who understood inspection capabilities beyond what normal FAA personnel possessed. These protection relays undergo stress testing beyond normal operational parameters? Amanda asked, indicating components identical to those that had failed in United 342. 300% of maximum rated load, Mercer confirmed, demonstrating a testing sequence that appeared to exceed safety requirements. Each unit is individually certified before shipping. Amanda nodded while her equipment detected the truth beneath this performance. The testing sequence included a subtle software modification that registered successful results while actually bypassing critical verification steps. The components appeared perfectly tested on paper while harboring vulnerabilities that would only manifest under specific conditions. The evidence was building systematically, not random manufacturing defects or quality control failures, but deliberate subversion of safety systems designed to appear legitimate under normal inspection. More troubling, the pattern suggested coordination between manufacturing and maintenance operations, ensuring that vulnerable components remained in service despite safety directives requiring their replacement. As the facility tour concluded, Amanda identified the final piece of her investigation: access to the secure server room, where testing logs and certification records were maintained. "I'll need to verify digital records against the physical testing we've observed," she explained to Wilson. "Standard procedure for component traceability." The server room represented the most sensitive area of her investigation, where digital evidence would confirm the deliberate nature of the vulnerability pattern. It also presented the greatest risk of exposure if the facility harbored individuals aware of her true purpose. Wilson hesitated momentarily before providing access. "Of course. Robert can assist you with accessing the appropriate databases." Amanda noted the specific designation of Mercer as her escort, the same technician whose testing procedures had demonstrated suspicious patterns. The assignment wasn't coincidental, suggesting Mercer held responsibilities beyond his official position. Inside the server room, Amanda connected her specialized equipment to the facility's network while Mercer observed with increasing tension. Her standard verification software was actually deploying sophisticated analysis algorithms designed to identify patterns of deliberate tampering across thousands of certification records. "These validation processes are more extensive than our usual FAA inspections," Mercer noted, watching as Amanda's system accessed databases beyond those typically reviewed. "New protocols following recent incidents," Amanda explained smoothly. "We're correlating manufacturing data across multiple facilities to identify potential systemic issues." As her equipment completed its analysis, the evidence became undeniable: systematic modification of testing procedures for specific component batches, digital certification records that masked deliberate vulnerabilities, and maintenance tracking. Systems designed to ensure compromised components remained in service despite safety directives. More significantly, the pattern included sophisticated digital countermeasures that would prevent normal inspection processes from detecting these modifications. Only specialized equipment like Amanda's could identify the discrepancies between documented testing and actual component performance. "I believe I have everything I need," Amanda announced, securing her equipment while transmitting encrypted data to systems beyond the facility's awareness. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Mercer." As they exited the server room, Amanda noticed Mercer touch his phone briefly, a subtle movement that suggested communication beyond casual checking. The gesture confirmed her assessment that Mercer represented more than a nervous technician concerned about inspection results. Wilson waited in the main conference room, his professional courtesy masking growing concern about an inspection that had extended well beyond normal procedures. "Have you found everything satisfactory, Ms. Parker?" "I'll be compiling my report for review by senior officials," Amanda replied diplomatically. "You can expect formal communication through standard channels within 2 weeks." As Amanda prepared to depart, Mercer disappeared briefly before returning with what appeared to be additional documentation. "These are the supplemental certification records you requested, Ms. Parker." Amanda accepted the folder while noting that she had made no such request. Mercer was creating pretext for additional interaction, likely to confirm his growing suspicions about her true purpose. "Thank you." These will be helpful for my final assessment. Outside the facility, Amanda walked purposefully toward her government-issued vehicle, aware that her movements were being observed from multiple vantage points. The investigation had yielded exactly what Program Director Callahan had suspected: deliberate sabotage of critical safety components through sophisticated manipulation of manufacturing and certification processes. As she drove away from Precision Aeronautics, Amanda activated her secure communication system. Sunbird to oversight. Preliminary confirmation of target facility involvement. Evidence suggests deliberate component compromise through coordinated manufacturing and testing manipulation. Subject Mercer displays characteristics consistent with embedded asset rather than compromised employee. Acknowledged, Sunbird, Callahan's voice replied through the secure channel. Additional surveillance assets are being deployed to monitor subject movements. Proceed to secondary target for correlation confirmation. What had begun as investigation into a single aircraft emergency was expanding into identification of a sophisticated network designed to compromise aviation safety through methods invisible to conventional oversight. The pattern suggested capabilities beyond individual sabotage, state-level resources, deployed with strategic patience to create vulnerabilities that could be exploited at times of their choosing. Amanda's next destination was Integrated Maintenance Services, a contractor responsible for component replacement and certification at the airline operating United 342, the connection between manufacturing vulnerability and maintenance failure would complete the evidence chain needed to identify the full scope of the threat. As she merged onto the highway, Amanda noticed a dark sedan maintaining consistent distance behind her, professional surveillance rather than random traffic. The observation confirmed that her investigation had triggered response protocols from whoever coordinated the sabotage network. Sunbird to oversight. I have company. Dark sedan, 2 occupants, maintaining surveillance distance. Acknowledged. Countermeasures authorized. Support team converging on your location. Amanda adjusted her driving pattern subtly, creating distance from civilian traffic while moving toward an interchange where support assets could intercept the surveillance vehicle. The methodical precision that defined her flying translated seamlessly to tactical driving, maintaining situational awareness while executing maneuvers that appeared routine to casual observation. At the designated interchange, Amanda executed a series of lane changes that forced her followers to reveal their intentions through mirroring movements. As they committed to pursuit, unmarked vehicles smoothly intercepted the sedan, boxing it into a controlled stop while appearing to be normal traffic movement to other drivers. The interception occurred with such professional efficiency that most motorists remained unaware that a counterintelligence operation had just concluded in their midst. Amanda continued toward her secondary target, leaving the surveillance team to be processed by personnel who specialized in questioning individuals with foreign intelligence connections. Integrated Maintenance Services occupied a sprawling facility adjacent to Reagan National Airport, where airlines contracted specialized maintenance beyond their in-house capabilities. Amanda's credentials granted immediate access to areas where critical components were certified and installed, the final link in the chain that allowed vulnerable systems to remain in commercial aircraft, despite safety directives requiring their replacement. Unlike the manufacturing facility where vulnerability was created, the maintenance operation represented where compromised components were deliberately preserved in active service. The sophisticated nature of the operation became evident as Amanda's specialized equipment identified maintenance records, systematically modified to show compliance with safety directives, while actually ensuring vulnerable components remained installed. Ms. Parker, this is highly irregular. The maintenance director protested as Amanda accessed databases beyond standard inspection parameters. These records contain proprietary maintenance procedures. I understand your concern, Amanda replied. with bureaucratic authority that brooked no argument. However, my authorization extends to all certification records following specific safety directives. I'll need complete access to your component tracking system for the 800 series electrical distribution systems. What her equipment revealed was damning. Systematic falsification of compliance records for safety directives, specifically targeting the vulnerable components. Aircraft documented as compliant had actually undergone procedures designed to maintain the vulnerability while creating records that would satisfy conventional inspection. More troubling, the pattern included aircraft currently in service across multiple airlines, each carrying passengers unaware that critical safety systems contained deliberately preserved vulnerabilities. United 342 hadn't been an isolated incident. It was simply the first time someone with Kelly's specialized knowledge had been present to identify and counter the failure sequence. Amanda's secure device activated with an urgent communication. From Director Callahan. Oversight to Sunbird. Surveillance subjects have diplomatic connections consistent with our assessment. We're implementing immediate grounding procedures for all potentially affected aircraft through emergency airworthiness directives. The investigation had reached its critical phase, moving from evidence gathering to active intervention preventing potential catastrophic failures. Aircraft identified through Amanda's investigation would be immediately removed from service for emergency inspection and component replacement, disrupting commercial operations but preventing disasters that would cost hundreds of lives. As Amanda completed her data collection at the maintenance facility, she received confirmation that the Emergency Airworthiness Directive had been issued. 14 aircraft immediately grounded across 3 major carriers, each identified through her investigation as containing the deliberately preserved vulnerability. Sunbird to oversight. Secondary confirmation complete. Maintenance records demonstrate systematic falsification to preserve vulnerability despite safety directives. Pattern includes active coordination between manufacturing and maintenance operations. Acknowledge Sunbird. Return to command for full debriefing. Intervention teams are deploying to all identified facilities. Amanda secured her equipment and departed the maintenance facility, her mission transitioning from investigation to the broader security implications of what she had discovered. The deliberate compromise of commercial aircraft safety systems represented not just criminal sabotage, but strategic threat with national security implications. 2 days later, Kelly Jenkins sat in the secure briefing facility at Andrews Air Force Base, her Amanda Parker identity set aside as she reported directly to the integrated intelligence team, assembled to address the threat she had uncovered. General Westfield and Director Callahan flanked the table's head, their expressions reflecting the seriousness of findings that transcended normal aviation safety concerns. The vulnerability pattern demonstrates sophisticated understanding of both technical systems and oversight procedures, Kelly explained, displaying evidence compiled from her investigation. Components were modified during manufacturing to create failure potential under specific conditions, then deliberately preserved through falsified maintenance compliance. The technical sophistication suggests state-level involvement rather than individual sabotage, added the CIA representative, reviewing intelligence assessments that correlated with Kelly's findings. Preliminary interrogation of subjects detained during the investigation confirms connections to foreign intelligence services. What makes this particularly concerning is the strategic patience demonstrated, Westfield noted. Creating vulnerabilities that remain dormant until specific activation conditions emerge, potentially allowing coordinated failure across multiple aircraft simultaneously. The implications hung heavily in the secure briefing room, the deliberate creation of aviation disaster potential as strategic leverage rather than immediate terrorist spectacle. The sophistication suggested adversaries thinking in terms of infrastructure vulnerability rather than isolated incidents. All identified. Aircraft have been grounded and vulnerable components replaced with verified systems, Callahan confirmed. Maintenance records have been corrected to ensure proper tracking through normal oversight procedures. What about United 342? Kelly asked, her professional detachment momentarily yielding to personal connection with the aircraft and crew. She had helped save. Back in service following complete systems replacement and verification, Westfield replied. Captain Harrington and his crew have been briefed regarding the technical aspects of what they experienced, though certain program details remain compartmentalized. Kelly nodded, understanding the careful balance between necessary disclosure and operational security. Harrington and Chun deserved to understand the technical reality of what they had experienced, even if certain aspects of Kelly's involvement remained classified beyond their access. This investigation has demonstrated the critical importance of having specialized capabilities positioned where conventional systems might fail, Director Callahan noted, transitioning to the operational implications of Kelly's success. The passenger manifest algorithm correctly identified United 342 as high risk based on maintenance patterns, allowing your presence when it mattered most. What remained unspoken but understood by everyone in the secure facility was the reality that Kelly represented: capabilities deliberately positioned beyond conventional frameworks, prepared to intervene when established systems proved insufficient. The quiet passenger in 15B who transformed into exactly what was needed when crisis emerged. "We're expanding the program based on your operational success," Westfield explained, activating displays that showed deployment patterns across global transportation networks. Additional specialists are being positioned on routes and in facilities where vulnerability patterns suggest potential risk. The briefing continued with operational details that would remain forever beyond public awareness. The quiet guardians positioned throughout critical infrastructure, prepared to emerge from invisibility when conventional safeguards failed. People with capabilities that existed outside normal frameworks, waiting patiently until the moment when those capabilities met the difference between disaster and survival. 3 months later, Captain James Harrington guided United 342 through clear skies toward San Diego, the aircraft systems functioning with the precise reliability that defined modern commercial aviation. In the cockpit, First Officer Chen managed communications and navigation while monitoring instruments that showed nothing but normal operations. Neither man spoke about what had happened during that storm-racked flight months earlier. Their professional conversation focused on routine matters that filled the hours between departure and arrival. Yet both carried the experience with them, the knowledge that they had encountered something beyond normal operational parameters and emerged with deeper understanding of what existed beyond conventional frameworks. In economy class, a quiet woman in 12C reviewed documents on her tablet, her presence unremarkable among business travelers focused on their own concerns. Her credentials identified her as Dr. Sarah Mitchell, engineering consultant, her demeanor suggesting nothing more significant than routine business travel. As the aircraft passed over the Rocky Mountains, Captain Harrington made a routine announcement regarding light turbulence ahead. Passengers secured items and fastened seatbelts, while flight attendants completed their service before potential rough air. Dr. Mitchell glanced out her window at the mountain landscape below, her trained eyes assessing weather patterns with professional interest before returning to her documents. The aircraft continued westward, its systems functioning normally, its passengers unaware of the quiet guardians who traveled among them. Below her seat, secured in a specialized compartment within her carry-on, 7 photographs remained precisely as they had been arranged, silent witnesses to a mission that continued beyond public awareness. Each face represented both loss and purpose, colleagues whose sacrifice had created the programs that now protected countless lives through capabilities that existed beyond conventional frameworks. The debt could never be fully repaid, but each Life saved represented partial fulfillment of promises made to those who had given everything in service to protection that most would never know existed. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, formerly Kelly Jenkins, formerly Amanda Parker, continued, reviewing her documents while the aircraft carried her toward the next assignment, where specialized capabilities might make the difference between disaster and survival. Sometimes legends emerged briefly into public awareness when circumstances required their particular capabilities. More often, they operated in quiet invisibility, their presence unnoticed until the precise moment when conventional systems proved insufficient. The passenger in 12C was simply the most recent incarnation of a legend that continued evolving to meet threats that existed beyond public awareness. Captain Harrington's voice came over the intercom, announcing their initial descent into San Diego. Passengers prepared for arrival. Flight attendants secured the cabin, and the routine precision of commercial aviation continued uninterrupted by the emergencies that specialized capabilities had been positioned to prevent. The quiet passenger closed her tablet and gazed out the window at the landscape below, her mind already processing the mission parameters for her next assignment. The legend would continue, evolving with each new identity, positioned precisely where specialized capabilities might be needed next. Some heroes received public recognition for actions visible to all. Others operated in domains beyond public awareness, their contributions known only to those who understood what existed in the space between conventional frameworks and extraordinary need. Both served with equal dedication, though one would remain forever in shadow while the other stood in light. The aircraft descended toward San Diego International Airport, one more safe arrival among thousands that defined modern commercial aviation. The passengers would depart to their various destinations, unaware that among them had traveled capabilities, deliberately positioned to ensure their safety through means that existed beyond conventional frameworks. The legend would continue, quiet and invisible until needed, then precise and effective when conventional systems proved insufficient. The passenger in 12C would disappear into her next assignment, her specialized capabilities waiting patiently for the moment when they might again make the difference between disaster and survival. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.